Today I am joined by Farhana Mayer, who is a Qur'anic Hermeneutics scholar. She was formerly a lecturer in Sufism at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies, and at the Institute of Ismaili Studies in London, where she lectured in Qur'anic Exegesis and headed the graduate program in Islamic Studies and Humanities. As a Laudato Si research affiliate, and now, Farhana has recently published a book called An Introduction to Qur'anic Ecology and Resonances with Laudato Si. This book outlines Qur'an-based theological and ethical principles which are useful for Muslims addressing today's ecological challenges. It highlights a significant common ground between Qur'anic and Catholic social teachings, emphasizing the sanctity of nature, the unity of world creation, humanity's unique role, the necessity of divine guidance, ethical responsibilities towards life and the planet. These overlaps lay a strong foundation for Catholic and Muslim interfaith cooperation in environmental stewardship. So Farhana, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, let's just get into it then.
Okay.
Can you tell me a bit more about how you got interested in the subject of Islam and ecology and what prompted you to write the book?
Yes. Okay. Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's, as I said, a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me on. The idea of this comparative study actually came when I first read Pope Francis's epistle, which you've mentioned, which is the full title of which is Laudato Si, on care for our common home. As I read it, I was immediately and very strongly struck by the significant amount of resonances with Quranic concepts, and I at once felt that there should be a systematic comparison made of these. And so really that was my introduction to the whole idea of integral ecology. Before I wrote the book, I was aware at a very basic level, I would say, of the unfolding environmental crisis. But I didn't really know the depth and the breadth or the extent and the severity of the situation. This is something I discovered and learned of as I did the research for and wrote the book. And first of all, reading the Laudato Si, I became acquainted with the broader malaise humans have created on Earth. Then through the research, I discovered the existing Muslim ecological voices led by Sayyid Hussein Nasr. Actually, I was familiar with Sheikh Hussein Nasr's works from before, but the new ones, Professor Osman Bakr, Professor Ibrahim Ozdemir, and our own British Muslim pioneer of the field, Haj Fazl Khalid, I discovered them and their writings, and I read their critiques of the roots of the ecological crisis, which are similar to the Catholic critiques. So having done that research and written the book, I now have a much deeper awareness of the, frankly, disastrous impact that economic greed and the pursuit of endless growth have had. And I can see how today's problems are connected with each other and with historic injustices. I'm also very engaged by the idea of integral ecology, which Pope Francis has highlighted, and which in Islamic terms is part of Tawheed, as the Muslim authors I mentioned have also indicated. Integral ecology shows the interconnectedness of not only all physical things, but also the spiritual. So this is something that is intrinsic to the Quranic view. This interconnection between everything, and between everything, including us and God, is, in my view, speaking as a person of faith, the fundamental basis of our ecological consciousness and our earthly existence. So I'm very aware of how the Quran, read through an ecological and ethical lens, has always sought to guide people to a sort of a balanced, moderate, and responsible way of living. That's why I feel strongly, and this is perhaps one of the key things that I would highlight, is that ecological consciousness is part and parcel of our spiritual consciousness. For me personally, the Quranic perspectives and integral ecology have brought together a number of things: a profound appreciation of the natural balances in our physical universe, and wonder of earthly life and its biodiversity. For me, these are signs of divine intent and intelligent design. This appreciation, though, is now coupled with profound sorrow at how humankind, in ignorance initially, but increasingly consciously now, has messed up these vital equilibriums and has negatively impacted the amazing biodiversity and ecosystems that we have on Earth. So basically, I've learned so much as a result of my research for the book, and it is my hope that readers will also benefit from reading it as I did from writing it, and that this more in-depth knowledge and awareness will enable all of us to live consciously in an ecologically more responsible way.
Okay, great. It sounds quite, there's a lot of similarities between the Pope's work, Our Care for Our Common Home, and what the Quran says as well.
Yeah.
again, they are basically the same religion, just different deviations of it.
The same message.
Yeah.
Different expressions.
Yeah. Anyway, so what are the core messages of your book then? Because I think you touched on them just now, but if you could elaborate on those a bit more, that would be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you say, it's a good point you make that really it's the same message that the papal teachings, social teachings, and the Quran have, but in different slightly different language. But in general, there are a number of things that I've sought to highlight in the book, and all of which help emphasize and enhance what I call our ecological consciousness as part of our spiritual and religious teachings. So I think this is quite important, the faith-based dimension, because there is a lot that's happening, thankfully, within the secular scientific world now to address the issues that we face, but to be aware of them as part of our spiritual and religious kind of on the radar, on our spiritual and religious radar, is very important. So the core messages of the book, what I take, well, as I've said already, the intertwined socio-ecological and environmental crisis is more stark and severe than many of us realize, like myself also at that point before I started the work. So what I've done is taken time at the beginning of the book to set that scene first. I think that's an important kind of introduction to those who may not know as much about the environmental ecological scenario as they might like to. But having set that scene, the book then demonstrates scriptural viewpoints that inform the Qur'anic ecological perspectives. So there are, if I kind of break it down into chunks, there are a number of kind of key concepts, Quranic concepts that feed into the ecological perspective that I'm talking about. And the very first one, and foremostly, is the concept of Tawheed as the foundation of the interconnectedness of all creation. So not only is Tawheed a foundational doctrine of Islam, it is also the fulcrum principle of Qur'anic ecology, which I expand on and explain and develop in the book. This is something also that the others like Professor Osman Bakr and the other authors I've mentioned, Haj Fazl Khalid, Professor Ibrahim, and Sheikh Hussein also talk about. Now, the second Quranic perspective that informs its ecology is the Quranic view of the whole of creation, the natural world and humankind, all as signs of God, ayatullah, which is the same word that the Quran uses to refer to its own verses. So the Quran draws a parallel between creation, the natural world, and the Quran, indicating that both are revelations of God. So this encourages us to assume the potential sanctity of everything and promotes respect and care for the natural world and for other people, as well as for the non-human beings on earth. So in the book, I draw attention to some key animal stories in the Quran, such as those of the Naqatullah, the she-camel of God, and of creation being communities of praise, which is how the Quran talks about them. The references are all in the book. And the idea that the Quranic idea that other creatures have their own relationship with God. So I unpack the ecological implications of these. And then thirdly, there is a Quranic perspective of the human being as both part of this set of signs of God with the rest of creation. So we're on a par there, we're equals, we're co-inhabitants, co-creatures. But then the Quran has this idea that humanity is the God-placed deputy on earth, Khalifatullah fil ard, which is in Surah 2, verse 30. And with that come the concomitant responsibilities and accountability to God. So this is another important point for the reader to note that, we are like the rest of the creatures on earth, we are signs of God. And then yet we have also this kind of position of responsibility and accountability as Khalifatullah fil ard, or Khalifa fil ard. More correctly, the phrase is not Khalifatullah, but Khalifa fil ard. Now, this relates to human stewardship on earth, which is, of course, a very important thing now in ecology. I remind readers of the Hadith Qudsi, sacred utterance, according to which God made creation because he loves to be known. كنت كنزا مخفيا فأحببت أن أعرف فخلقت الخلق. I was a hidden treasure. This is speaking in the divine voice. I was a hidden treasure and I loved to be known. So I made creation. I created creation. In other words, from this point of view, the purpose of creation is to get to know God through what he has created, through reading the existential revelation he has made. So those are the kind of key kind of perspectives within the Quran that come that feed into ecology and integral ecology. Then there are also the key Quranic virtues of balance, justice, equitability, that's adl and qist, moderation, wasatiyya, and not least mercy, rahmah. And they come within the overarching integral ecological point about tawheed and unity and interconnectedness, interconnection in and through God. So all the above are shown to be part of a profoundly God-centered Quranic ecology. So I highlight this further by showing how the most beautiful names of God in Islam provide us with an ethical framework within which to assess and situate our conduct and our responses and responsibilities in the face of the eco-environmental crisis. The book also demonstrates how these Quranic ecological virtues furnish a strong common ground with Catholic social teaching as presented in Laudato Si. And this is very important in showing that we have the strongest basis to form interfaith partnerships as we seek to care for our common home, to use the Pope's words. In fact, these ecological virtues reach beyond faith traditions to non-faith parties as well, because the principles of justice, moderation, balance, and mercy are in and of themselves at the core of the responses that everyone needs to make, and that many environmentalists, activists, and scientists have already been endeavoring to make and are promoting. So it's, while I talk about them very much in relation to the Quranic perspective or to Catholic teaching, they are not confined to faith-based perspectives. These are values that are common to humanity and therefore can provide this common ethical framework which all humans can agree on. For what it's worth, I really do feel that the Quranic and papal call to simplicity and respectfulness is essential. Because if you think about it, the problems arise when there is an unsatiated desire for more and more, takathur, which is condemned in the Quran, notably in Surah 102. The more material goods we have, the more negative impact we are likely to have on the environment, including on other living creatures on Earth. The destruction of the natural habitats of wild animals, for example, is a well-known issue that needs to be addressed, but the standards in animal husbandry also need to improve and change. They still leave a lot to be desired in many parts of the world, and we need to question the scale of industrialized animal farming. Animal husbandry for human consumption contributes greatly to global warming, not least through animal methane emissions and the fuel emissions in the transportation of meat. According to UN statistics, farming animals for food, meat, dairy, and eggs, produces 14.5% of all the greenhouse anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. And that is 1.5% more GHG resulting from land, sea, and air transport combined. That's a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So, people who think that animal welfare, etc., is not really part of the environmental problematica are very wrong. It's really right there. According to Animal Aid, 83% of the world's agricultural land is used for raising animals, including growing crops to feed them. And 80% of Amazon rainforest destruction is due to clearing rainforest to create pasture for cattle. This is according to the statistics released by Animal Aid. Waste from animal farming is the biggest source of water pollution in the UK. One can go on and on. But coming directly to Muslims now, and I'm going to say something that may be rather radical here, but I do strongly feel that Muslim scholars should engage in studying how Muslims can continue to fulfill the religious obligation of the Eid al-Adha sacrifices, but in ways that ensure a humane environment for both the animals to be sacrificed and the people directly performing it. and so that there is no wastage of the meat, so that the ritual is performed in keeping with the Qur'anic principles of moderation and mercy, so that the ritual is performed in a way that is halalan wa tayyiban, and in keeping with the original impetus of the ritual. When the ritual was established at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the numbers of animals were so much fewer than they are now. So I wonder, is there a balanced way forward, for instance, by jurisprudential consensus, to making the obligation, the fard, a communal one rather than an individual fard? And I'm not the first person to say this. Is there a way that all individuals can contribute towards the purchase of animals, for example, but that the number of sacrificed animals be limited to a moderate figure? So this is a field of research which I feel it is imperative for us Muslims to engage in. Animal communities, as the Quran points out, for example, in Surah 1744 and 638, are communities of praise. So we really need to value them in that respect as well. So altogether, I do think we need to move forward into a simpler, more moderate and balanced lifestyle. Neither poverty nor excessive wealth, neither hunger nor overconsumption, neither ascetic nor profligate, but a balanced and optimal position. But this is a big challenge, especially when huge kind of vested interests wield brute power, and when the idea that we should tread water once the optimal balance is reached or has been achieved is treated as stagnation, the way it is in most current economic systems. But if we find and maintain optimal balance, the more we can continue without further irreparable damage and harm. So this is another way of stating in terms of sustainability that we should achieve a consistent replacement rate in our use of natural resources, which ensures replenishment of resources, and that we should, as called for by sustainable development, balance environment, equity, and economics in a way that ensures we meet our needs without detrimental exploitation of people and other living creatures, land, water, or any natural resources, and without depleting the resources so that the future generations also have their fair share, which relates to climate justice, something else I address in the book. Now, respect for all people on earth and their rights to the use of land are in keeping with Quranic teachings, that we be neither arrogant nor insolent, that we do not treat people contemptuously, and that different peoples mutually acknowledge each other, and by extension, mutually acknowledge each other's rights and offer mutual understanding and support to each other. And this relates to how those countries most responsible for generating climate crisis should help those countries who are suffering climate change impacts most, especially since those countries contributed little to the making of the climate crisis. This is, of course, another important part of climate justice. And at the COPs, they talk about, they have established a fund for loss and damages, but, there's a long way to go before it's actually functioning in a way that, that is equitable and fair. Anyway, so these are some of the key messages of the book, and I'm sorry I have gone on a bit there.
No, that was quite a useful summary. I think you captured a lot of information in that. Let's try and unpack some of those points. I think first, this might be an interesting one. So you mentioned like Tawheed and ecology. So what are the implications of Tawheed regarding ecology, like as opposed to, let's say, paganism or having multiple deities? How does Tawheed affect ecology?
Well, the idea of Tawheed really is that everything is interconnected. So our ways of living are impacted by and impact each other, all of us, all creation. So this is the interconnection kind of on the kind of horizontal level. But moreover, the idea of Tawheed, and we go back to Surah Ikhlas, which I discuss at length in the book, is that this unity is in God. He is Al-Ahad Al-Wahid. He is the one and the only. Nothing is outside of him. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. Nothing is outside of him. Nothing is around him. So all of creation is actually within God, so to speak. Therefore, the unity of everything, the interconnectedness of everything is within God. So we have a unity of multiplicity of creation in God, and congruently, we have an extension of the divine unity within creation, a unity of intention, a unity of purpose, a unity of qualities. And this this is how, this idea that we're not in isolation, we are all, remember, we're all signs of God. So if we're all signs of God, we're siblings in a way, the whole of creation. This is what I was trying to say, that on one level, the Quran establishes us within the set of creation as ayatullah, like everything else. But then within that, we have that position of responsibility as Khalifa fil Ard, to the stewards on earth, on this earth at least, because Khalq is huge, but we have the responsibility here. So that is a way, is what Tawheed is, that the unity, what Osman Bakr calls the unicity of nature, which is the ecological inference from the principle of the divine unity. That's what Tawheed is.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, you touched on a Khalifa there, which is I think a word used in the Quran to describe mankind, the creation of mankind. What does it mean to be a Khalifa today? Like, what are the implications for our lifestyles and our behaviors today? How do we know if we're being good Khalifas or not?
Well, if the purpose of creation, according to that Hadith Qudsi, is that we should be able to know God through His creation, and if animals on earth are communities of praise to God, and praise of God is one of the key things that we humans, we Muslims, are called to do, then part of being Khalifa is to ensure that these unique forms of praise that different creatures are, we don't negatively harm, impact them, that we nurture them. So actually, this is something I was going to talk about a bit later, but I'm going to just bring it up right now, because part of being Khalifa is in that verse, Surah 2, verse 30 to 32, I think it is, when God says to the angels that I'm going to create a Khalifa fil Ard. فَإِذَا سَوَيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. And then when I have formed him symmetrically, God says, and when I have breathed into him something of my spirit, then fall in prostration to him. The angels, they are concerned about this. They think, are you going to put on earth a being who sheds blood and wreaks corruption? And my word, were they right? Right? They were really right. But then God's reply is to say to them, I know what you do not know. And then it goes on to say, and he taught Adam, who represents all of humanity here, he taught Adam all the names. So now this knowledge of the names, according to the Muslim authors and various commentators, is what distinguishes humanity and qualifies them to be Khalifa fil Ard. What are the names that God taught Adam or humanity? Some commentators say, like Ibn Arabi say, it is the divine names themselves. Okay, the others say that it is the names of all things, and actually humanity is, if you think about it, we're as a collectivity, we are naming far off constellations and galaxies and all of that, the first 4 minutes after the Big Bang. And we are on Earth also, and within ourselves, we're naming, discovering things, naming them. We've named our chromosomes. We've done a lot of naming of things. So Osman Bakr says that is all, both of that is, both interpretations of names are correct, and that is what qualifies us to be the Khalifa. Now, if the divine names, and this is something I do propose in the book, if the divine names are something that we are endowed with, and I think Surah 30 verse 30, which talks about Fitratullah allati fatara nasa alayha, that the nature of God, according to which he made the nature of humanity, the fitra, the names are part of that fitra. Now, in a very limited way. So if you think about, the Muslim theologians, the Asharites in particular, spoke about the capability for an act as occurring at the same time as the act itself, al-istita' ma'al fa'l, that you have the capability to act at the time that you decide to act. Now, if we think of the names as potential keys within us by which we can access the divine energies that are enshrined in those names, because the names contain principles, they're the characteristics and principles and powers and attributes of God. We have potential access to them through those names. And how do we access the names? It is by actually conducting ourselves in harmony with the quality of that name. So the image that comes to my mind, thinking of what the theologians were saying, is out of a keyboard. It's only when you press a key that you hear its particular note. So as khulafa fil ard, when we do something that is in harmony with one of those divine qualities, we extend that quality, the energy of that quality into creation. And this is not a small thing. This is a very big thing, because what we're doing there is we are both infusing the earthly context with the divine energy, but also relating the earthly context back to God through the same act. So it's like infusion and refusion, all in the same act. Now, what are the names that pertain to ecology? Because actually being good, having a good ecological lifestyle is part of being Khalifa fil Ard. For example, the divine names Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the names of mercy, are to do with nurturing. Okay, so we have to nurture God's creation, the book of Revelation that is creation. And the other names like Al-Adl and Al-Muqsid relate directly to being just and equitable, including to other creatures, not just between humans. And goodness me, we're struggling with that anyway, haven't achieved anything there, but yet we need to extend it to be just and equitable to the rest of creation, including the planet itself. We don't own the earth. It is described in the Quran as Ardullah. It belongs to God. We are tenants. So as khulafa, as tenants, what are we supposed to do? Not junk the planet, which is what we've done, but preserve it, protect it, and look after it and nurture it. The names Al-Mu'id and Al-Muhyi, the restorer and the revivifier, I think are very pertinent to rewilding and restoration and restoring the balances as much as we can. Reviewing how our own practices on individual, societal, and global levels, are they in keeping with the broader perspective that we have been talking about or not? And Ashafi, for example, as the divine name, relates to the imperative need to heal the situation that we're in, that we have created, that humanity has created. And in doing that, we are extending the divine qualities and fulfilling our stewardship trust. Well, better than I do, of course, that Al-Mizan, the kind of international document by Othman Llewellyn and other authors, talks about the amana, the trust that humankind has been given. So fulfilling that trust, that custodial trust of looking after God's planet as a form of praise to him and thanks to him, and love for what he has created, and love for him through what he has created. These are all parts, I think, of our responsibilities as khulafa, to know God through worship, through concomitant good behavior, in our own lives, and with respect to our environment and other creatures. So we have a lot of work to do. We've not yet reached that position. We're not fulfilling our that role of the Khalifa very well. We haven't got there. I mean, maybe we had it in the past and lost it, but we certainly lost it. We now, as a collectivity, need to work our way back towards that.
And I find it's very much common sense in how to think about all of this, because if you think about even something simple where actually I'll take a step back. Even if you think about the creation story when God expels Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden, I personally don't believe it was heaven. I think it was on earth. But besides that, the word he used was litaskinu fiha, right? So litaskinu, which means to find tranquility in, right? So even though he's punishing them, he's saying, look, have a great time here, wherever you're going. And if you extrapolate that, so the earth is meant to be a place where we have a great time and we're thankful to God for it, right? So God wants us to be prosperous and to be happy. And the way to prosper is by preserving the environment, because that's where we get our prosperity from. And then you go back to the verse in Surah Rum, where it says corruption has appeared in the land, in land and sea by what men's hands have done. So then,
Yes.
so then let them taste some of their part of their actions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and the idea is so that they will
environmental.
return. So that
Yeah.
I mean, that is the key,
And that's
the
environmental damage.
ecological verse. That's the key ecological verse. Corruption has appeared in the earth and on the land and in the sea because of what the hands of people have done, yani what they've acquired. And God allows us to taste something of that so that we turn back to better ways of living. And that is what ecological conversion is.
And that's not just in the Quran, that's even in the Bible, like in Leviticus chapter 26, where God tells the Israelites, if you disobey me, I'm going to send famines upon you, I'm going to release plagues upon you, right?
Yeah.
It's a punishment for disbelieving. And then if you do believe and obey the law, then you'll be prosperous, you'll be fruitful and multiply, your nations will expand, it'll give you strength and security. It's a very strong
exactly.
yeah.
And Surah 55, which talks about the balance and that we should not corrupt or spoil the balance. And that's so key. Everything comes down to this balance, really. I think, there is the natural balance, everything, and I spell this out in the book. These balances, we were meant to maintain them, but we haven't, And so now if we can go back to restoring them somehow, or at least not making it worse, that will be a great thing. The other thing about balance is I come back to the divine names, how do we implement them and use them as a framework? I personally do believe that the names are the very scales on which we have to assess our action. And the balance, the kind of fulcrum and the pivot of the divine names, the scales of the divine names, is Rahmah. And there is, God in the Quran, it says how God, at some imponderable moment, he chose to make mercy his default mode. Kataba ala nafsihi rahmah. He inscribed mercy upon himself. Now, that means, he made mercy his paramount obligation, correct? But it also means that no other attribute of God is described in the Quran in this way. He made Rahmah the intrinsic essential quality. So Rahmah is what we need to achieve. So how is it merciful to be, killing off, whether it's people or animals, or, killing off the land itself, because now, land dumps are just full of plastic, they're not earth anymore. Yeah. How is that, achieving Rahmah? And Rahmah, remember, is to do with the womb, it's to do with nurturing, it's to do with caring. It's a very kind of, I won't say maternal quality, but it's not obviously limited to women. It's there for everyone.
And I think when you talk about signs of creation, or like the creation as a sign of God, I think that's another really important aspect to this view of the world as well, because the earth, the universe is all part of the creation of God, right? And if you look at the evolution of the earth over the last 4.6 billion years, how human life only exists for like the last 200,000 years out of 4.6 billion, and you've had like a process of the Earth's climate changing, being terraformed, different creation, different kinds of animals coming into being and going, and their deposits like decaying away and fueling the soil for future generations, and even the stars as well. The earlier generation of stars dying away, a new generation being born, their lifespans being a certain length, and then they've been in the Quran. It says the stars are there for navigation for you. So there's a whole grand plan there. And then we come to this idea of balance, like, okay, there's a whole evolution going on for 4.6 billion years. The conditions have been set where humanity can prosper. Like, you only get agriculture in the last 10,000 years. You're not going to get agriculture in any other time in the Earth's history, because the climate conditions are not there yet. There's a whole plan unfolding, and at the right time, humans can prosper. But then we start destroying the planet.
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy.
God set up the stage for us to have a really good time, and then we undo it.
Yeah, I mean, and good is probably the key word there. I mean, how are we defining a really good time? You see, because a materialist would say to have a really good time means I can just go and use everything for myself, but no, a really good time. It's and that it comes down to respect, respect, mutual respect. Because if I perceive you as an entity that has your own relationship with my Lord and your Lord, then I should treat you with respect, right? So you see, this is why the authors and the popes, they all say that the problem started when you desacralize nature, and you can only desacralize nature also when they took God out of the equation, and then humans are not particularly important anymore, and nothing else is very important. And then here you are with no God to answer to, no idea of the hereafter. You just have to make the best of it. And so you can just do whatever you want to make the best of it for yourself. And that's at the root of kind of the
we just have to
exploitation
play
of nature.
catch up in implementing regulation because there's no God to be held accountable to. You have to.
Yeah, well, exactly. So you can just do this is this is how that mindset has led to this situation, the lack of accountability, and the let me just do what I need to do for myself. So it all comes down to conceptualization of what your purpose on earth is, and from that you get the different paths extending. Yeah.
I want to touch on the interfaith aspect because there's a big part of your book about interfaith dialogue and connecting with not just Muslims but other people as well. How does the Quran, or how does your book and how does the message of the Quran facilitate that interfaith dialogue with regards to environment? And do you think that using Quranic principles, it's easier to connect with people outside of the Abrahamic tradition as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned those verses and that talk about how, I mean, I don't have the exact quote to hand. I think it's Surah 4 somewhere. It's in the book. But the idea of mutual, that God created, you see, let's go back to the verse, Sanurihim ayatina fil afaqi wa fi anfusihim. We show them our signs, says God, in upon the horizons and in themselves. And then human diversity also, because the Quran talks about your colors and your languages, the diversity in them. These are all part of the divine revelation, as it were, the divine creation and expression. So signs of God. So our diversity is a deliberate divine sign. Therefore, and then it goes on, then there's the verse about mutual acknowledgement. So you recognize each other and mutually acknowledge each other. So in that, you have the basis for all respect for all people and mutual support and mutual recognition. Now, the principles that I've been talking about, remember, when Adam represents all collectivity, it is not one particular sector. It's not this religion or that, it's all humanity. So if Adam has been taught all the names, that's all humanity has been endowed with these principles, then, we have common ground. Now, I may talk about it in terms of the Quranic way, or that, the Pope talks about it in terms of Catholic ways or whatever, but these are common principles to all humanity. And so we have really, on the principial level, we have all that we need to engage with other faiths and beyond faith even. That's what I feel.
Yeah, I think that when you read the Quran, you can immediately tell it's not just for Muslims. I mean, even as it's being revealed, it's addressing Christians, it's addressing pagans, it's addressing Jews. It's quite rarely actually addressing just the followers of the Prophet because there's not that many of them. Calling everyone to the final path. And if you take the Quran in context as well, like the Quran is like chapter 5 of God's communication with mankind. You've got the Sufi Ibrahim, his scriptures, you've got the Torah, you've got the Gospels of the Psalms of David, you've got the Gospels, and then you have the Quran, which is chapter 5, the criterion. So it's useful. Like, I think reading the Quran makes you want to read everything else as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think if we go beyond, the Hindus, for example, have in their kind of metaphysics, their mathematical calculations, for example, the days and nights of Brahma, who is the creator, Al-Khaliq, right? They tally with current astronomical, current astrophysical, let me get my terms right, current astrophysical, predictions of how long the Earth will, or the universe will go, billions and billions of years. And that tallies with what the Hindu metaphysicians were saying way back. So, we should learn from each other. We should understand from each other and hear each other and, draw the correct consequences, the good consequences from our common ground. And the differences are, again, going back to they're part of God's intention. So let's not worry about the differences, let them be. let us not antagonize over the differences, but rather let us, you know, focus on how we can work together for this really critical issue. Because if we do destroy, I mean, if we do mess up the balances so much that, you know, global warming and climate changes, and we're no longer, you know, that we'll have a very diminished habitable landmass. And look at what's already happening over land. Imagine how much it's going to be when we have less land. And we will have climatic conditions that are so severe, so much more severe. Again, the floods are happening, the severe heating is happening. It's all unfolding. And if we mess this up, then what? You know? So we've really got to, there's no other planet in the Goldilocks zone that has got this sort of developed, this level of developed life and biodiversity. Because even if there are the conditions for life, the life will be very, very basic. As you said, billions of years to get to this stage of having this sort of developed level of life and intelligence. So it's kind of like, we've really got to make this work, and we've really got to look after it.
Yeah.
Oh, and now, you know, you were talking about the descriptions in the Quran. I was struck by how in some places, when the Quran describes hell, you know, boiling winds and fires and scorching winds. And this was at the time when all those fires were going on last year, or whenever it was, the year before. And I thought, oh my God, we have unleashed hell on earth.
In Australia, when it was all red.
And Europe and America, you know. So we are actually unleashing hell on earth. Whereas what this good life that we were meant, good time we were meant to have, was really actually to extend paradise on earth.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on. Where can people find out more about you and your book?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and the book is available as a free PDF for downloading at the Laudato Si Research Institute website. And you have various other links there as well.